At 2 a.m. in a restless Greyhound bus station, a tired war veteran trembled as he counted singles for a ticket home he couldn't afford. Labeled a washout, forgotten by the country he served, Elijah Torres stood invisible as the teenage clerk tapped his nails impatiently on the counter. Before the boy could call security, a janitor with crooked glasses quietly placed his last crumpled $20 on the desk. He didn't know the station cameras had caught it all, nor that by sunrise, that single gesture would ignite a movement that would carry him far beyond the walls of that bus station. But before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. The buzz of fluorescent bulbs hummed through the terminal, a tired sound that made the place feel even more forgotten than it was. Plastic chairs, cracked vending machines, and coffee that tasted like burnt asphalt, the kind of place where nobody looked anyone in the eye. At 2 a.m., the room was half empty, travelers pretending to sleep, mothers clutching their children tighter, drivers waiting for the next route announcement on garbled intercom speakers. Elijah Torres stood at the counter, shoulders hunched as though bearing a weight no one else could see. His army jacket was faded at the seams, his boots scuffed past recognition. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled singles and coins from his pocket, counting quietly, trying to piece together just enough for a one-way ticket back to his hometown. $42, $50. He had $22 tenors. Behind the counter, Tyler Jenkins, 17, headphones in one ear, chin pimples starting to flare from too much greasy pizza, rolled his eyes. "Sir, like I said, you don't have enough. I can't just give it to you. Policy." Voices began to stir around the station. An old woman muttered, "Another one of those homeless vets." A businessman clutched his briefcase tighter. Near the vending machine, someone whispered the word they always used. Failure. It spread across the room like static. Washed up. User. Crazy. Elijah heard them all. He always did. He tried a smile, small, hollow. "Maybe I can pay the rest at the next stop? I'll work for it. Please, just need to get home." The teenager's hand hovered over the phone, ready to call for security. "I'm sorry, sir. You need exact fare or I can't print the ticket." That's when a voice, quiet, unassuming, broke the static. "I've got it." Every head turned toward the janitor, Ramon Delgado, a man most had never even noticed in 3 years of passing through that station. His work shirt was threadbare, name tag bent, mop streaked faintly with last night's grime. He pushed a dented cart filled with cleaning supplies and smelled faintly of bleach and tiredness. Nobody ever looked at him, but he was looking at Elijah. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a $20 bill, limp and folded 100 times, the kind of worn money no one holds on to unless they've held it too long. "Take it," Ramon said, sliding it toward the clerk. Elijah shook his head in disbelief. "No, man, you can't." "I can," Ramon interrupted softly, steady but firm, "because somebody once did it for me. Don't argue." The station went silent except for the hum of the vending machine and the distant hiss of a bus pulling into the bay. A man who scrubbed toilets and emptied trash cans had just bought a soldier his way home. None of them knew that the cracked black cameras mounted in the corners, ignored by everyone, including Ramon, had captured the whole thing. None of them knew that within hours, that moment would be traveling across the screens of millions. Ramon Delgado wiped sweat from his brow as he pushed his cart through the linoleum aisles, each squeak of the wheels a soundtrack to years of quiet labor. For most, he was invisible, just the janitor who cleaned the station at night and kept the broken vending machines humming. But Ramon carried a history that few had ever guessed. 20 years ago, Ramon had been a small business owner, running a modest but beloved bookstore in a bustling neighborhood. It was a place where neighbors gathered, flipped through pages, and found refuge from the noise of the city. He knew everyone's favorite authors, remembered birthdays, lent books without asking for payment. That store was more than a business. It was a community. But life has a way of testing even the strongest roots. When the economy soured and bigger chains moved in with their glossy flyers and deep pockets, Ramon watched his dream slowly unravel. Late nights spent stacking unsold books gave way to mounting bills and overdue rent. Then, when a sudden fire ravaged the building next door, the landlord raised the rent beyond reach. The store closed. Rumors swirled. Someone said Ramon had gambled away some of his savings. Others whispered he wasn't tough enough to compete. The whispers were louder than the fire. Ramon left without a fight, carrying a few keepsakes and a heart full of memories. For more than a decade, he drifted, odd jobs and nights spent sleeping on benches in parks. Then, a chance encounter got him the janitor's job in the bus station. It wasn't much, but it was honest work. And every night, as he cleaned floors and restocked soap dispensers, he held on to a simple truth. Kindness mattered. Just because the world had forgotten him didn't mean he'd forget others. Elijah Torres, meanwhile, was fighting his own battles. 3 tours overseas had taken more than his youth. They had carved scars in his spirit, unseen to most. When he returned, he expected gratitude, perhaps a helping hand. Instead, he found silence and judgment in places where he had once hoped for welcome. His marriage dissolved under the weight of his silence and nightmares. His home was repossessed. And when bills piled up, when the memories haunted and the city grew cold, Elijah found himself relying on shelters and temporary housing. But the stigma of being a broken soldier followed him like a shadow. That night in the bus station, the weight of it all pressed down harder than ever. Each coin counted wasn't just money. It was a ticket to a new chance, a hope to reconnect with his estranged daughter waiting quietly in a small town miles away. But hope, like coins, was running thin. As the buzz of fluorescent lights flickered overhead, 2 men, one invisible and broken, the other overlooked but resilient, found themselves at the crossroads of judgment and kindness. Neither knew the ripple their actions would set in motion. But when Ramon slid that fading $20 toward Elijah, the first thread of redemption had been woven. But none of this would have been caught if not for Emma Larson, the station's cleaning crew supervisor's niece, who had stayed late waiting for her ride. Her phone was old, her hands shaky as she zoomed in on the security footage, recognizing the moment as something rare and real, a simple act of kindness in a world that often seemed to forget how to be kind. Emma's video would soon cross the digital globe, touching hearts and shaking judgments in places no one expected. At 7 a.m. the next morning, Emma's video was already spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. On TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, it was shared with captions like, "A broken veteran AS last 20 bought by a stranger, and kindness still exists." For Elijah, the world had gone quiet for too long. But now the silence was broken by messages of hope and solidarity. Comments poured in from strangers, some veterans, some strangers, some simply people tired of cynicism, thanking Ramon for his kindness and Elijah for his courage to keep going. The bus station clerk's mother, who had watched the scene unfold before her son's impatient tapping, emailed the station manager asking if they could recognize Ramon for his act. The community radio played the story during the morning drive, and local newspapers scrambled to find both men to share their fuller story. This wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. At a coffee shop downtown, Jake Foster scrolled through the viral video, eyes misting as he recognized elements from his own life. A former Marine who'd fallen on hard times, Jake knew the cost of silence and stigma. Gathering his friends from the Veterans Support Group, he proposed a plan. We are going to show the world that no veteran is alone. Plans began to unfold. A convoy of motorcycles and cars from veterans and supporters heading toward Elijah's hometown to welcome him home in a way he never expected. Flyers calling for kindness, respect, and community support spread across social media. Ramon, who had no idea the waves his gesture had caused, was stunned when neighbors at the bus station began approaching him, shaking his hand and sharing their thanks. He was invited to speak at local schools, churches, and community centers about the power of a simple act of kindness. Elijah, overwhelmed by the flood of support, stepped off the bus in his town greeted by cheers, banners, and faces lit with genuine respect. It was a homecoming not just of a soldier, but of a man reclaimed by a community that had once turned its back. Together, Ramon and Elijah stood before a crowd at the town square, sharing their stories of hardship, judgment, and how one small act can become the first brick in a bridge built from kindness and understanding. "No one is invisible," Ramon said, voice steady but full of emotion. "And no act of kindness is ever wasted." The crowd murmured in agreement, the air thick with hope. And just like that, the bus station janitor and the forgotten soldier weren't just faces in a crowd. They were symbols of something bigger. Before we close, what's one kind thing you've seen or done recently? Drop it below to remind us all that kindness isn't lost. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the world needs to hear more stories like this. 6 months later, the old bus station was transformed in ways no renovation could match. Walls once ignored now bore murals of strength, service, and kindness. A corner dedicated to veterans and community helpers stood bright, with photos of Ramon, Elijah, and many others whose stories had woven a new fabric of belonging. Ramon, now no longer invisible, was often seated near the mural, telling visitors stories of hope. He smiled more freely now, his hands less worn, as the community embraced him not just as a janitor, but as a symbol of resilience. Elijah had rekindled bonds with his daughter, taking classes to study counseling, inspired by the help he finally received and longed to give back. His footsteps no longer echoed alone through cold shelters, but found rhythm in neighborhoods that once shut their doors. At Murphy's Corner, the coffee shop where Jake had first come up with the idea, weekly meetings brought together veterans, neighbors, and strangers who'd found common ground in kindness. They called it the Bridge, a place where judgment gave way to understanding. As Ramon and Elijah stood together during the unveiling of the bus station's new dedication plaque, Ramon looked at his old friend and said, "We didn't just build a corner, we built a home." Elijah nodded, his voice steady but soft. "And sometimes it just takes $1, a moment, a choice to remind the world what family really means." The plaque gleamed under the station's bright lights, reading, "To those who stand when others step aside, who give when others take, and who remind us that kindness is the strongest currency of all." In the quiet moments after the crowd had gone, Ramon folded a crumpled $20 bill and tucked it carefully into his jacket pocket, a reminder that simple kindness can change lives forever. So what about you? When's the last time a small act changed your world? Share your stories below. And if this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the chance to be part of something bigger. Because kindness, real, courageous kindness, is the thread that connects us all.